Okay. Where do you want to start, Bud?
Oh, yeah. Here's talk about transport choices and the programme reduction. We've had quite a few questions, so I'll just cover off a few things before we get into it, if that's all right. As I'm sure you'll remember, 9 of the 10 projects had the designs approved on the council meeting for the 21st and 22nd of September. The one remaining one is PT, so you approved the first batch on the 1st of November, and there are more to come next year, and I'll talk a bit about PT because that was one of the questions that we've had. Later on the 22nd of September, we're informed of changes to the delivery dates and likely cuts to budget. On the 19th of October, we were informed how those reductions would be formed, that effectively we had to take a 10% cut in the likely funding subsidy that we got from Wakatahi. They left it up to councils to decide quite how that would be made up. In the report, it lays out some of the suggestions they put, and they made a point that that any changes still need to be in line with the transport choices design criteria. So we can reduce scope, but we can only reduce scope so far. It still has to meet the objectives they're looking for. On the 27th of October, we then got another email from Wakatahi saying that there was a pause on signing any further funding agreements pending direction from the new government. So some of the discussions we've had, I think those two things have got muddled up, and I think trying to be really clear, the decision that's in front of you today is about how we deal with that 10% reduction in funding. We're not dealing with the pause on the signing of the funding agreements. I suppose the obvious question then is if it is paused, why do we need to do it today? And the word we're getting from Wakatahi is that they are putting together their entire funding agreement to go to the minister. If we're not in that batch, we may not get funding, or we may not get all the funding that at the moment they're talking about. So we still do need to go through this process now. Effectively, the choice that's in front of you is that either we cut projects or we cut parts of projects, or that we keep all the projects or most of the projects and we increase our local share from sort of 90-10 up to probably somewhere near a 75-25, as it says in the report. The staff recommendation is that we drop Westmoreland, the Westmoreland cycle connection, that we significantly reduce the scope of Simeon Street, north of Coronation Street, and that we scale the bus stop programme so it gets bigger or smaller to fit however much funding we've got to keep us in that 90-10 split of funding. They've also said to us that they still expect some projects to drop out, and if there is funding, then we're in a really strong place to get additional funding. So the reason they're worded very strangely is that effectively we're trying to keep them on programme in case more funding comes, but we're not really expecting it to happen. So like I said, I appreciate there was a question about, well, effectively we're pausing them, but we'll do them if we get a funding agreement. Well, we won't do them unless we get a funding agreement. I agree that is a bit of a weird wording, but effectively that's the intent, is that we don't expect to get funding for them, but I don't want to drop them entirely in case we do get a funding agreement at a later date. And we've tried to time bound that as well. So if we don't get a funding agreement by the end of the financial year, then they'll drop off the capital programme.
Okay.
We've been asked to put in impacts of these changes. They're really, really complex because they require us to make quite a lot of assumptions about when we would get funding agreements. Some of them may attract the traditional 51, 90, 49% subsidy, and we'd need to pick through all those projects bit by bit. And even there may be bits of projects that attract that subsidy and bits that don't. So it's quite a complex process. So that's why we're going to spend a bit more time and come back to you at F&P next month. The question we had about the bus stop prioritisation, there's a bus stop prioritisation at the back in the appendix. Priority 1 is effectively what you've approved already on the 1st of November. They are chosen because they're the closest to the central city. They're the areas with the lowest car ownership, and therefore we think they're probably ripe for patronage to go up. So that's why they've been chosen as the first. 2 and 3 then get into the higher frequency bus routes, key activity centres, and that's where we already see higher patronage numbers, and it would then cater to those. I think that's pretty much all I needed to cover. So, yeah.
So, question from me. Must be very frustrating for you guys to have done all that work, gone to the submissions, and then get the rug whipped out from underneath you. It must have been. And now you've got to go back and maybe rescope some stuff. That is a lot of work, so I feel very sorry for you. But what you're saying is we've got to do this to be in the tent, because if we're not in the tent, we won't get any dough if there is some.
I can't say that definitively, but yeah, that's the feeling we're getting. If we haven't put forward a proposal, then yeah, we may not be in there if there is some funding.
So the only definitive we have at the moment is there has been a 50 million reduction in the Transport Choices program of the $350 million program, and that's required a 10% reduction across the board. That is a definitive that we do know from Waka Kotahi at this point in time, and
okay.
therefore
So, if and I'm not saying this, if there's a further reduction, are these ones that are all here, are they prioritised, or say there is more of a reduction and we prioritise these, we just say, right, we'll take off the bottom one?
No,
we haven't got to the priority list yet, have we?
At this stage, no. And we can report back to that at F&P if that suits you.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, Councillor Templeton.
Thanks so much. So these projects originally were kind of rushed through so we could get them all done and actually constructed by mid next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to do that, we had to defer other projects that we had on the program, things like CERF and a whole range of things.
Yep.
So if we deferred these projects now and don't go ahead with the construction, and then the funding becomes available mid next year, to be able to then fit these projects in the program that we've got for next year, we would need to defer more projects. Is that right? Does that make sense? We would just deliver less this year, and we're waiting for the funding confirmation. We'd need to defer more projects to be able to deliver these.
we would have to look at the deliverability of our program next year, and that's part of what we will have to report back on what the implications of that potentially will be if we didn't do any of these.
So
we are
projects,
anticipating that
yeah,
a significant portion of them will go through.
Yeah. So the projects that we did defer to be able to get these in the program, it's actually not possible now to bring those back in time and do all of the planning and get them constructed instead, is it? Within this to the mid next year time frame.
No. I think we need to
I'm not expecting a yes answer.
I think that's something else we need to report back on in the
I think it would just mean that
it's
we
the
deliver
implications of this. I mean, broadly, the broader implications of the impact on the whole of the Transport Choices portfolio, if you like, is not something we've reported on in this report. We are trying to grapple with the what if this, what if that. It is very much a crystal ball gazing exercise that we're trying to look at. There is potential in quarters 3 and 4 that we could bring forward work that has been deferred and get it going. Getting it constructed is probably going to be a long reach, but some of it was never going to be constructed next year anyway.
Yeah,
it was the design resource that we were freeing up to get this done. A lot of design resources gone into getting this to this point, so there's a potential that it may not have the impact that you think.
yeah. But there's also, on top of the design resource, we had the construction businesses who had been talked to and geared up and got ready to go on this, and now there's people without work certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So we are looking through the chair. We are looking at what we can do to provide some of that to the market as well at the moment. So there's a big scramble going on at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Kia ora. I've just got a question on the costs for these projects, particularly the design, and around how much resource actually goes into the design phase of any project on average. If you've got an example, that's fine.
No, look. Jacob and the team have worked really, really hard to find a different way I mean, we were also using this as a trial to try and say, look, there's a different way to deliver quickly. That has meant pouring resource into this. How many project managers have we had assigned?
Six, probably about a third of our team, I would say, somewhere in that kind of region. Yeah,
So
So 6, you say?
6 to 8
6 to 8. Yeah,
Of
project managers. There's been a
1
program.
FTEs on average.
6 to
pretty
8
much.
FTE.
Yeah,
Wow.
And that's the project management resource working with designers. There will be designers on that. There's been
engagement have been heavily
Engagement,
involved. Comms
yeah.
have been heavily involved. So there's been a lot of staff throughout the building that have been
So
heavily
it's a lot
involved.
of coin, essentially.
Yeah,
and this has been a massive team effort from everyone to deliver this.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I've got for now. There might be some more later. Thanks.
Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you. As part of this process, is our council or the mayor writing to the incoming minister and saying, "Oi, don't mess with our projects we've put all this work into," or we're just playing the waiting game?
Is that a question for us or the chair?
Anyone who's able to answer it's a question for.
Well, once we had a new minister,
It's our pleasure to have you.
we'll write to him.
Lovely, thank you.
That will be soon. Councillor McClellan, please.
Hey, just if we were to guarantee and underwrite all the CERF projects, could we make option 4.2 as it is alternative option 4? The alternative option stated in 4.2 of the report. Could we make that decision today?
that's a bit of holding at risk, isn't it?
That's, I believe, to do the whole thing at risk, I believe you would need to know where you were going to fund it from. So the advice we've had is that we would need to know exactly where we're going to fund it from if it wasn't funded. So we would need to do the whole program at risk effectively. We would need to do quite a lot of work to figure out how we were going, because this is a third of our capital program. It's a big chunk of change to try and figure out how we would substitute. I'm not sure at the moment how we would manage that with the whole program.
By substitute, you can't mean in terms of deliverability. Do you mean
No, I mean in terms of substituting budget for the balance that wouldn't have been coming in from Waka Kotahi.
Right.
Yeah. So that whole program is a pretty big job for us to figure that out. So we've been, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Scandrett, please.
Yeah, thank you. With regards to the Westmoreland section, would this allow us to go back then and to talk with the community, because the pinch points are with the bridge by the Fernleyhurst and the shops, etc. So would this allow us, because of some of the communities you saw, as we know, it was the lowest level of support because the community felt that there wasn't time to discuss things properly, etc. So would this give us ability to go back and talk with the community and get that safety level right from, say, the Fernleyhurst Bridge right through to Penruddock and further?
In short, yes, but I don't think we would have time to do that within time or the ability to do that within the Transport Choices programme. I think that's the... so we could choose to do it as council, but I think we would be doing it with council budgets.
Because the Transport Choices, Waka Kotahi technically dictated the design, but now it seems in the information that they're open to an adjustment of the scope. Is that correct?
They still have to meet the Transport Choices criteria, which in this case would mean separated cycleways. And it's, without going into too much detail, that corridor is kind of too narrow and has too many overheads to just do a bi-directional on one side. So you either lose all the parking or you start undergrounding services, and it becomes a much bigger, much longer, much more expensive project to
So
deliver.
when they say adjust scope, they don't really mean that. What they really mean is that sounds nice on a piece of paper.
With things like Simeon Street, we can justify the reduction in scope because there's a
Yep.
good reason that still fits within the criteria that they want. And so we have reduced scope in some places. And the bus stops, because they're discrete elements, we can pick bits in and out. With this, it's kind of a whole piece. It kind of has to work as a whole piece.
Okay.
So you can't pick and choose bits of it to have in and out.
Okay, thank you.
One just coming to my mind. One wee question. Take the likes of Cashmere Road, like you said. So there's room for a cycleway each side, but there's not a room for a bi-directional one side. Is that? Do I get that right?
No, yeah. Sorry. Can I interpret what Jacob said? And the road, the road width is such that whether you had cycleways on either side or a bi-directional on one side, you would lose all the parking. It doesn't matter which type, you would still lose all the parking. There isn't enough room for a separated cycle facility, be it one way or two way, and parking.
Thank you. Councillor Johansson.
That's correct, isn't it?
Well, without doing the utilities work to underground all the overhead. So that's the key bit, is that if you undergrounded all of those, you might have space to create a bi-directional, but we couldn't do that within the Transport Choices program, the time frame. So it was something we discounted very quickly.
So just sorry, does that mean because it's a Transport Choices thing and Waka Kotahi will only pay for it, it has to be separated once?
Yes.
Sorry, one either way, one each side?
No,
Can-
just separated
Okay,
from the traffic.
that's all right, I'll shut up.
Simeon Street, as an example, is a bi-directional one that is within Transport Choices.
Thank
so they're
you.
not looking for unidirectional.
Councillor Johansson.
Yeah, so just wondering, like with the Te Aratai one, where it's obviously gone over budget by about $1 million, and we need to find a saving of 10%. Given that we've made some changes to the design already, just in small places, to have a shared path rather than the separated cycle lanes on each side, why can't we look at doing a little bit more of that one to reduce the cost, given that would save money and it would respond to the community concerns?
Te Aratai effectively acts as a link between the two major cycle routes, and they're not open to shared paths on that section because of the number of driveways, effectively. So there's the numbers of people crossing, and we've got testimony from people who go to Te Aratai who've been hit by cars coming out of driveways and hurt themselves quite seriously. So it's just not something they're open to.
So there's no design changes we can make to Te Aratai to reduce the cost and to get within the budget, or to get within the reduced budget?
Not that will meet, not as you're talking, not that will meet the requirements of the Transport Choices program.
Right. So if we didn't do it as part of the Transport Choices and went back to the roughly $500,000 design that we'd already had looked at, why would we not go to that option?
Because of the fact that there is evidence to suggest that using the footpath is not the safest option.
Do we have evidence from where we've put in those sorts of designs in other parts of the city around what the risk rate is?
We've got evidence from users on that very piece of road. So that's what we were
without any
Obviously.
cycleway.
And we do have issues in other places where we have shared paths right up against driveway exits.
at.
So we've got
That's the issue we've got.
evidence
So
around.
Yeah.
that's where it is.
Okay. And then the bus stop one just really kind of puzzles me, because we're waiting for another report to come back with the other bus stops for approval.
Yep.
But in the meantime, we're going ahead to Waka Kotahi to seek funding for those ones that we've already approved.
Yes.
Yes, plus any ones that we approve in future reports.
So the idea of just not doing the higher patronage numbers still doesn't really make sense to me. Wouldn't we be better to go and put them in where they've got higher patronage?
So the funding we've got at the minute would get us effectively priorities 1, 2, and 3.
So we are.
So
doing-
that
guys,
that
we'll-
gets you
we'll be
your
here. Yeah, thanks.
so that gets you that area with high potential and the two areas which already have high patronage.
But that's if Waka Kotahi funds everything. If they don't,
Yeah.
then we're only stuck with the ones we've already approved.
No, we get 1, 2, and 3, don't we?
If they approve the funding, yeah, that's what we're.
I'm gonna let two more questions, and they're up here already. Councillor Templeton and Councillor McClellan, please. Otherwise, we'll be dark.
Given that there seems to be a desire to progress with these projects if we can, one that occurs to me is, especially with the Te Aratai College one, which is also partly CRAF funded for the like the earthquake kind of funding. Is it possible to even select, because you talk about the budget constraints, maybe 1, 2, or 3 of these to just progress with now, being that enough budget would be there to do that, and have the other ones, and with this information can come back in the report to finance the next meeting, whether it's possible just to do that and what the top priorities would be if we could just continue with it, and that could be some of that work that we give to the the business contractors. If it was possible to do that rather than putting all of them on hold, if it's not possible to do all of them underwrite. Does that make sense? You know what I'm asking? Yeah.
So effectively, we start as some of them at risk.
Yeah, but because there's enough kind of in the budget potentially there that I don't know whether there is a potential to do it partly.
So,
Yeah.
let me start.
Please. Oh, it's putting you on the spot a bit, and it
No,
might be that you come
but
back with that.
Through the chair,
meeting.
I'm thinking of a way to answer your question, and probably not answer your question as well, to be fair. To answer the question, but prior to process of way we could do that. So, through the chair, the mayor, you've asked for us to prioritise it so that we don't have to keep coming back through this process. I suggest we do an assessment of which ones are either operationally can get moving and address that market concern that you raised, or will have a big impact or would be best to be done at a, to get moving, and the reasons for that, and maybe pick the top 3 is in that priority list and say, well, that's how we prioritise them and why. And so from finance and performance, you can give us the assessment. But the advice we've had is that if you are going to proceed at risk, we do have to understand and know where that funding is going to come from should we not achieve the funding from Waka Kotahi. So that has to go alongside the conversation. It's not to say that it would change at that point, but we need to know where we're getting it from.
And so some of these projects were ones that were brought forward to get done. But things like Te Aratai, for example, was a project we wanted to do anyway, and soon, and it was happening because of crap, but this was able to be enhanced. So
Yeah,
it's not
like Linwood Village streetscapes.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor McClellan, please.
I've got some wording to move. That
Yeah, I see a copy of War and Peace here popping up. In front
Oh
of me.
yeah, well I didn't write it. So I mean, essentially, it would just re-include Westmoreland, which would mean that we cover the shortfall, and it would guarantee that the Linwood Village project proceeded, regardless of the CERF funding arrangement.
So just in my head, if we say we're going to cover the shortfall if we get no funding, does that mean we cover it all?
No. Only yes for Linwood Village. That's the only one that we would be guaranteeing to happen. But remember, it's already in their annual plan anyway. The rest of it, if we didn't get the CERF funding, it would still not proceed. No, you get some funding. You would get the 51% as opposed to the 90% funding. So basically, Linwood would be the only one we're guaranteeing. It's already in the plan as it is. And the other change is the inclusion of Westmoreland.
So, but if you put one,
if you amended it. I was just putting forward the wording I've already submitted, but I would be open to changing it if there was.
If you're putting one in, you've got to be taking one out, though, surely. No. You can't do it all. Now, just question, and Yanni, Councillor Johansson brought it up, the one down at Linwood, the cycle lane, is that if that's $1 million over already, Lynette, does that mean we fund that?
No, that's within the scope. So the Te Aratai College Cycle Connection was a bid that was put through originally with one scope. This is one that has changed, and the interventions have changed because of the Transport Choices requirements around separated cycleways. So the cost has gone up because there is a separated cycleway gone in there, or being proposed. And as such, the Transport Choices program is supporting that, aren't they?
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps.
And one, sorry.
I was going to say perhaps staff could cover off the effect of the wording change if there's any lack of clarity, given that they've helped write it. If that was useful, just a suggestion.
Have we got any contractors that are actually signed up for these, under contract yet on any of these?
Yes, but I think our financial liability is quite small, if
Okay.
not zero.
The bulk of them are signed up under sort of ECI arrangements. Linwood is the one that is.
Yeah.
Okay, so what worries me that we might be
But-
quietly getting ourselves in the gun.
No, they were all signed up on the proviso that it was subject to funding.
Okay, no, that's good. That's good. Thank you. So we have got all of Councillor McClellan's amendments in there.
And they're being circulated to councillors.
And who is the mover of this, please? I'm the mover, but I believe Melanie is the seconder. For the whole lot?
Because it's coming at 4.
Yep.
Okay,
Sam
so Jake's moving it, the whole lot.
So they have been emailed.
So just Jacob, just one question: if we don't get the funding, like we're thinking we're going to get at the moment, it's 10% less. If it's a bit less or whatever, or if it's the same at the 10% less, one of these is going to go. It has to go, or is what this amendments and stuff is putting in here going to make us have to do it?
Only one of them we have to do, but that won't cost us anything.
Sorry, we've been getting ourselves tied in knots a little bit today. So my you go.
Do you
You
want
can
me?
go
Okay,
this
so
one.
that-
You've been tying in the biggest
So
knot.
effectively, there's two separate resolutions here. One is to add Westmoreland, and that would mean that the funding would shift from about 90-10 to about sort of 75-25, 80-20 kind of thing.
Which we would have to find.
Which we would have to find, yes. And we would either do that through substitutions or through additional funding in the LTP. And that's something we can discuss when we come back in F&P. The other resolution is to start Linwood Village at risk. I think we've tried to write them in such a way that you could vote for one and against the other. You don't have to vote for them together, if that makes sense.
You're confused.
Yeah,
Councillor Scandrick.
and to start it at risk again, we would need to come back and advise where we would get this funding from if it wasn't approved.
But it probably will be. It may be. Yeah.
So yeah, through the F&P.
Okay, Councillor Scandrick.
Thank you. So, as it stands with regards to the Kashmir Road, so that the south or the west end is going to totally change, or could totally change from the original design, depending on the Penruddock entranceway and what's being looked at there. So that would nullify the original design that was designed for Wakakatahi. So, and when we've talked extensively about other ways to make this stretch of road safer in the meantime, if there's no funding, and we talked about the pinch point at the bridge, etc., and making those areas safe, which is the number one concern for the local community. So I'm just wondering, if I vote for this, and we are then generally funding it over and above Wakatahi, do we then have ability to change the scope to better meet the community's wants?
They're still putting in 70%.
They are
You still want their funding in this, under this program, it still needs to meet those funding
So if
requirements.
I voted for this, I am voting for the design for Wakakatahi, even though the change on what's happening at Penruddock Rise, or may change, will change the design totally, which is totally okay.
I think it would change a very small section at the western end. Other than that, I think it would probably all stand.
Okay.
Of all of these projects, which ones would have the most safety improvements for residents?
That's what we need to come. That's that whole prioritisation,
Yeah.
the list, and we only got the sort of heads up about that idea a couple of days ago. So I
can't-
just think we
yeah,
did. We
I
just
can't just pick one. Yeah.
Well done. Councillor Keon.
Yeah, hi. So just a quick question. The reason these projects actually came up and leapfrogged a whole lot of other ones that were prioritised years ago is because of a directive from government and on some outcomes they were trying to get. But these essentially leapfrog things like the shared path down Gardeners Road and projects like that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. We reprioritised the program with the list of projects that were deferred. Yeah.
Not based on the outcomes that your team wanted, but what government was directing. So there was an option to get 90% funding. So those projects which aren't as high a priority as other ones around the city, because we already had them as priorities, these leapfrog because of the funding arrangement, not because of our city's priorities. That's correct, isn't it?
That was a decision you made, yes?
Yeah.
As council.
Well, some mate. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. I think we should just about go into debate now.
Sorry, is it worth like Councillor McCullen's talking about this not originally being, it being a project separate to the kind of the CERF funding and stuff anyway? Would it be easier to bring the Linwood Village Streetscape Enhancements project out of the Transport Choices package if we were just going to do it anyway, leaving, or is that an F&P kind of thing? Leaving. Yeah.
Okay, so just not to put right, we've got to move in a second. We'll now go into the debate.
So can I? Do you
Sorry,
mind if I make
Karen.
one point? So the Linwood Village is originally a master plan, so it doesn't attract NZTA subsidy. So there may be sections of it that we can get subsidy for, but it wouldn't get a full 51%.
All right.
Sorry, I've put
I do
question-
want to move on. You
Yeah, but I've put these
Yeah, but
questions
it
in
was
the
on
head,
program.
ahead of the meeting to the Office of the CE. I still haven't had a response. Am I going to get a response around the engagement around Linwood Park, around the user groups, and the extent to which we've consulted people?
Is Linwood Park part of this work?
So we've got the new sports field where the temporary village used to be.
Yep. Is it part of what the surf stuff is?
Yeah, it's the Te Aratai.
It's not.
Sorry, we haven't had that question, and I
Repeatedly
don't.
put it in the Office of the CE.
So I don't Linwood Park and the consultation around Linwood Park. I don't understand.
No,
I
it
see
was around
Tessa's
talking to
behind
the early New Beginnings Centre, talking to the Linwood League, and talking to the user groups of Linwood Park around the implications of the design.
Through the chair, can I have one
You're
second?
getting off. This is getting out of control. It's part of. Oh, Tess is talking to them. Okay, while
So
we're
we've
talking
done an
about this, we
extensive
will
amounts
have a
of
10-minute break to discuss what we're doing, and then we will come back. Thank you.
I'll answer the question then. Thank
The
you.
time will be just after past.
Yes, we know.
We know.
Yeah.